Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. A prisoner has been found dead in a police lockup on the east coast Demerara. In the region, Brazil's former leader has taken a comfortable lead in the latest opinion poll ahead of next year's presidential elections. We also have the latest international news from the BBC World Service. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says steps are being taken to acquire vaccines for children 5 to 11 years old.
One of the drawbacks in our vaccination program is that we don't have as yet vaccines for the 11 to 5. And we are making attempts to get that. So there's a sizable part of our population that we cannot immunize as yet because we don't have those vaccines.
However, vaccines are not available for newborn children up to 4 years old.
And vaccines for 5 to, from neonatal status to say 5 years of age. There are no vaccines as yet approved for that age group. We remain hopeful that such a vaccine will become available in the first quarter of next year. So there's still that segment of our population from a neonate right up to say 11 years where vaccines are currently not available, and therefore we still have this segment of the population that cannot get a vaccine. And so when you look at our numbers, we have to factor in this unvaccinated population when we're doing our calculations.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. The Netherlands headquartered SBM Offshore, which is building and operating oil-producing ships to operate in Guyana's waters, says that at least 46% of its workforce is Guyanese. Natural Resources Minister Vikram Bharat is welcoming this move by the company, which has been contracted by ExxonMobil to build the vessels that produce and offload crude oil to exporting tankers. SBM yesterday coincided its 5th anniversary in Guyana with the opening of its headquarters on Sheriff Street, Georgetown. In his remarks, President Irfan Ali said that the local content bill that would be tabled in the National Assembly today was not drafted in a vacuum. The man wanted for Wednesday's murder of East Coast Demerara conductor surrendered to police at the Brigdam police station in the company of his lawyer hours later. The Guyana Police Force said 27-year-old Paul Jr. Lynch of 127 Bachelor's Adventure, East Coast Demerara, surrendered shortly after the wanted bulletin was issued. Dead is Marvin Nurse of Haslington, East Coast Demerara. Later Wednesday afternoon, police issued a wanted bulletin for Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch allegedly stabbed to death Nurse at Route 44 Minibus Park, Commerce Street, Georgetown. Police say that the two men were pelting each other with broken bottles and bricks. Eventually, their disagreement escalated, and Mr. Lynch allegedly stabbed Nurse with a knife to his left side chest. The victim ran a short distance before falling to the ground, while the suspect escaped in a minibus. Police say that nurse was picked up and taken to the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, where he was pronounced dead while undergoing surgery. Police are probing the circumstances surrounding the death of a prisoner at the Betafawakting police station. He was found dead at about 4:35 yesterday afternoon, hours after he was arrested as a suspect in a break and enter and a larceny. He has been identified as 25-year-old Julian Harrison of LBI East Coast Demerara. Police say he was the only prisoner in the lockups. His body was found hanging by his neck from a metal bar vent by his jersey, which was stripped into long pieces and tied together. Now for the news in the region. Pressure is mounting on Suriname's Vice President Ronnie Brunswick to apologize for his bodyguard's assault of a journalist. The Surinamese Journalists Association has announced a boycott of all activities by Mr. Brunswick. They also plan to picket his office as they press for him to apologize to journalist Jason Penas. He was badly beaten outside the National Assembly as he was taking a picture of Mr. Brunswick in his car. Mr. Brunswick has said that Mr. Penas breached security. Mr. Brunswick has asked for a meeting with the Suriname Journalists Association, but that body has refused to do so. Instead, the organization is demanding a public apology first before such talks are held. Several opposition parliamentarians have also heaped criticism on Vice President Brunswick. President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi has since asked the Attorney General to investigate the matter. Brazil's former leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva holds a comfortable lead in the polls ahead of next year's presidential election. Incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro follows with almost 30 percentage points less. The results of a poll were released Tuesday. If the vote were to take place today, 48% of respondents said they would vote for Lula, as the former president is widely known, while 21% would vote for Bolsonaro, according to the poll, which was published on news website G1. Sergio Moro, a former anti-corruption judge who helped Lula go to prison before joining Bolsonaro's government to argue with the conservative leader, came third with 6% of the vote. In a second scenario where minor candidates were not listed as an option, Lula received 49% of the hypothetical vote versus 22% for Bolsonaro. Moro was third with 8%. The poll is largely in line with an IPEC poll released in June that shows Bolsonaro is struggling to regain traction with voters after his popularity waned earlier this year, in part due to his handling of the coronavirus pandemic, which has seen more than 600,000 Brazilians. It also highlights Lula's striking turnaround in his fortunes in recent years. In prison when Bolsonaro was elected in 2018, the Supreme Court dismissed Lula's corruption charges, allowing him to run for another term. Lula ruled Brazil from 2003 to 2011. IPEC interviewed 2,002 people from December 9 to 13 in 144 cities across Brazil. The study has a margin of error of 2 percentage points. The Tobago House of Assembly THA has limited funds left to fund its expenses until the end of the financial quarter. This was the assessment of the finances of the THA by its Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, Farley Augustine. The details in this report from TT News Online.
During Wednesday's post-executive media briefing, Chief Secretary Farley Augustine said what the island is left with is not enough. He assured the PDP-led THA administration would find the resources needed.
That having received all of our first quarter disbursements, we are almost through it all in terms of spending it all. And that brings me to the next issue. Number 2, issue of unspent balances. And when I talk about unspent balances, I'm talking about monies that were allocated but have not been spent to date. And to date, as of today, the 15th of December, today is the 15th, correct? Today, the 15th of December, our unspent balance stands at $50,506,501. Let me go that again. $50,506,501.
Chief Secretary Augustine noted while his intention is not to be vindictive, he sought to share with Tobagonians the island's financial predicament. He gave an account of the funds received through bond financing in May.
In less than 6 months, every single cent of the $163 million was spent. All of it. And I have since requested a list of all the projects that this money was spent on.
The final area, Chief Secretary Augustine also addressed the contingency fund, which he said is used as an emergency fund. He said normally this would have a healthy balance, but gave the figures as of December 15th.
It's $392,000, $543.88. That's $392,000, $543.88. That is almost zero.
The Chief Secretary also called on central government to address the manner in which Tobago's quarterly allocations are disbursed. He noted while it has been done irregularly and on a monthly basis, this is not according to the law. Carissa Douglas, 40TT News.
And here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Turkey's central bank has cut interest rates for a 4th consecutive month, a move that's driven the value of the Turkish currency to a new low. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been defending the economic policies that analysts say are responsible for spiralling inflation and the tumbling lira, saying Turkey's destiny would not be determined by speculators. Victoria Craig explains why he's sticking to his policy.
A simple equation, I guess, for him. He wants a low-rate, high-growth environment, and he sort of has one part. He has both sides of that equation, but it isn't quite working, economists say. If you look at GDP growth, it's above 7%, or it was in the third quarter of this year compared to last year. But the difference is, I think, you think about major world economies, and you think about what happens when interest rates are low. It means low borrowing costs, and it means investors will come in and invest in your country and contribute to economic growth. And so that's what President Erdogan wants to see. But as I said, unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
By contrast, the Bank of England has increased interest rates by 0.25%. Inflation is running at more than 5%, and the bank has decided that is of more concern than the spread of the Omicron variant of coronavirus. The decision surprised investors, as Andrew Verity explains.
This is only the third time the Bank of England's raised interest rates in the past 13 years. Most traders in the city and economists were this morning expecting the central bank to wait to find out more about how the Omicron variant had hit the economy. But after figures published this week showed inflation at 5.1%, its highest level in more than a decade, the bank's Monetary Policy Committee voted 8-1 to raise the official rate now to 0.25%. The committee acknowledged that the economic recovery was slowing, and they've revised down their forecast for growth next year.
The European Central Bank held its interest rate, but announced that it would end its emergency bond buying programme in March. It will, however, step up its pre-pandemic asset buying scheme, saying it believes the spike in inflation is temporary. Leaders of Baltic and Central European member states of the EU have told a summit that the bloc is under assault from Russia on multiple fronts and must unite behind new economic sanctions. The Latvian Prime Minister, Krišjānis Kariņš, listed several causes for concern. He mentioned Russian disinformation, energy prices, the migrants' crisis on the Belarusian border, and the deployment of tens of thousands of troops close to Russia's border with Ukraine.
What we would want to avoid at all costs is a heightened military situation in Ukraine. And this is potentially best obtained right now with very clear, painful economic sanctions on Russia if they were to escalate further.
This is Moira Alderson with the latest world news from the BBC. The Kremlin has rejected a call by the European Court of Human Rights for Russia to tighten legislation on domestic violence. President Putin's spokesman said current legislation provided all the necessary tools to combat the problem. On Tuesday, the court ordered Russia to pay compensation to 4 victims of domestic violence, including one woman who'd had both her hands chopped off by her husband. France's Interior Ministry has estimated that some 110,000 fake COVID passes are being used in the country. They're needed to use public transport and visit restaurants and some other locations. The Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, has warned that some fakes have been obtained with the collusion of real doctors and nurses. Beijing has condemned a decision by the United States to place sanctions on 4 Chinese companies, allegedly producing the basic ingredients that are used to manufacture highly addictive painkillers. Beijing says it's actively suppressing the production of fentanyl and other precursor ingredients, as Celia Hatton reports.
The executive order from the White House targeted several Chinese companies that U.S. investigators accuse of manufacturing large quantities of fentanyl, a powerful synthetic painkiller that was linked to more than 100,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. last year. The U.S. State Department also posted a $5 million reward for the arrest of a Chinese man, Chun-Fat Yip, who the U.S. says is responsible for a massive operation to produce and traffic dangerous precursor drugs.
A court in Germany has sentenced a man to life imprisonment for driving into a crowd watching a carnival procession last year, injuring nearly 90 people, more than 20 of them children. The man, named only as Morris P., rammed into the parade in the town of Volkmarschen in February. He was convicted on 89 counts of attempted murder. His motive is not clear. That's the latest world news from the BBC.
That was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. In the local news, a prisoner has been found dead in a police lockup on the east coast Demerara. In the region, Brazil's former leader has taken a comfortable lead in the latest opinion poll ahead of next year's presidential elections. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.